Getting into part 2 of maps here, we're going to do what is called Universal Transverse Mercator. It's just another way of recording location. But what we do in Universal Transverse Mercator, and by the way, this will make way more sense when you see the diagram on the next page, which I'll elaborate on it there. But we divide the Earth into meridians. Meridian simply means up and down. The prime meridian is a longitude line, so these are other longitude lines. It looks like we do use the prime meridian in UTM, Universal Transverse Mercator, at 0 degrees, but the actual meridian lines are 6 degrees apart and numbered, not numbers, 1 through 60, starting at the international date line and heading east. So even though we do use the prime meridian, 0 for your zone is here, and it goes all the way up to 60 over here at the international date line again. And so we count left to right, since most maps are split on the prime meridian there. That gives you your meridian number, or meridian zone. From there, we have latitude bands, and the latitude bands start at 80 degrees south and are 8 degrees wide and labeled C through X heading north. So C through X heading north, they are 8 degrees wide. It skips a lot of Antarctica, but we go all the way up to the end of your land masses here with Greenland and some of the Russian islands that are your furthest north there. With that. Having said that, the final band X, to catch those extra islands, are 12 degrees wide instead of 8 degrees wide. And if you actually start at 80 south and start, you have to subtract as you're counting down towards 0 at the equator and then adding 8 as you go up. You'll find that it would end at 80 north instead, and they kick it up to 84. They also skip letters I and O because they could get confused with ones and zeros, and the extreme polar regions are divided differently. They're divided horizontally into sections A, B, Y, Z, A, B being down at the South Pole, and YZ being up at the North Pole. To be honest, I have no clue how UTM coordinates are used there, but we're not going to deal with that because we're not going to have topographic maps of the North Polar regions, and we're going to ignore Antarctica when we work with topo maps here. Anyway, with all those things defined then, the meridian zones themselves are split down the middle at 3 degree increments off of the band to define the central meridian. So although meridian zone 31 here, for example, goes from 0 to 6, here again we have to ignore the polar region. Actually, you get distortion there because of this projection is what it is, but it goes from 0 to 6. The central meridian is 3 degrees here, and we measure everything from the central meridian and from the equator when doing UTM coordinates. But just to focus on the map here real quick, your first thing is to label both your meridian and your latitude zone. So this map has New York City as an example here at 18T. That means it is meridian zone 8T, and it is latitude zone T. Ohio is, I think, here-ish between these two. That is between S and T here. For your latitude band, our meridian zone is 17. So we're 17S here where we are. The northern regions up close to Lake Erie are 17T, and I actually have an article I'll share with you for you to read that gets into the specifics on different coordinate systems in Ohio. Anyway, here is a closer view. Actually, it looks like we crossed 16 and 17 there, as well as the north-south being S and T. So actually, we'd be in 16S where we are. Anyway, this here is a view of the meridians in the United States, and we are, you'll notice these lines here are not are not parallel. They are parallel on a different projection, but the lines are always perpendicular to the equator, and it turns out that on this projection, because the equator is a curved line, then these all end up being perpendicular still, so it makes them look like they are curved here. Anyway, getting into UTM coordinates, because all this does here is divide our UTM settings. The actual coordinates then, the central meridian is defined as being 500,000 meters from the edges. Generally speaking, that is true because of how we define the meter originally and how we defined the meter based off of latitude. However, it is not perfect, and as you go towards polar regions it gets more distorted, but we still define the central meridian as 500,000 meters. What it means is that the middle here is 500,000 meters from the edges at the equator. Up here it's a little bit closer, and it means that when you get to this actual edge line, you may not be at 0 meters away from the central, or 0 meters it'd actually be plus 5,000 meters 500,000 meters away from the central point. You may be slightly off of that. But we do everything from the central meridian. And then as you go left or west of that line, you would be subtracting from that 500,000 meters. I think I'm missing a 0 there because it is 500,000 meters. Or adding it to it as you go right or to the east. And that is called your easting, how far east or west you are off of the central meridian, off of those 3 degrees marks. Northing, though, is not based off of your latitude bands. I wish it was. It is not. It is based how far north or south of the equator you are, with south being negative and north being positive still. And so then when you do a UTM coordinate, and we'll do an example here in just a moment, you start out with your meridian zone number and the latitude band letter, followed by your easting and your northing. So here's Ohio. I took this image from the article that you're going to read. The numbers on the outside here are your latitude and longitude. So here in Shelby County, our latitude and longitude, actually in Russia here where we are in Shelby County, right on the dark Shelby-Miami border. In fact, you can go to Miami-Shelby Road and dark Shelby Road and actually find where those two intersect. And there's actually a USGS marker buried in the ground there, allegedly. I've looked for it several times. There's a hole where I know it used to be. There's a lot of dirt and crud on top of it. I don't know if it's still there, if it still exists, or it's been destroyed, but there is actually a marker. Those markers that are put in the ground by USGS then are used to survey locations, so they would start at that location and then survey away from it when trying to survey land. Anyway, our latitude here is somewhere between 40 and 41 degrees north. Our longitude is somewhere between 84 and 85 degrees west, and here are the specific values in degrees, minutes, and seconds, as well as in decimal degrees for latitude, longitude. For our UTM, this here is the dividing line between zones 16 and 17. So we in Shelby are here in 16. And as I said, north-south in Ohio is divided between S and T. And we are in zone T, it turns out. I think I said a moment ago that the north would be T. So obviously I misread that prior map. But we are in zone T. On our south to north, our west to east one. So zone 16, zone T. From there, we are, the central part of the zone is the 500,000 meters, and we are, I didn't put commas in here, 220,311.71 meters east of the central meridian, which is at 87 west over here in Indiana. So what you do is you take your central meridian, and again, if you go east, you add that value to it. If you go west, you subtract that value to it. And so then we end up being this here, which is 720,311.71 meters east of the start of zone 16. From there, we are 4,457,026.8 meters north of the equator. So our actual coordinate, which I did not type up here, would be 16t. Then the 720,000 number, followed by the 400, and I'm going to round it to 46,000 number for our easting and our northing.